Have you ever paused long enough to ask yourself why your life has demanded so much endurance? Why you were forced to mature early, to carry weight others never noticed, to survive seasons that should have broken you but didn't? What if the pain you tried to escape was actually pointing you toward your calling? What if the pressure wasn't meant to crush you, but to reveal who you really are? Chosen one. Let me awaken something deep inside you with one question. What if everything you survived was proof that you were being prepared, not punished? You didn't arrive at this moment by accident. You were guided here. Every disappointment that stripped illusions away, every betrayal that sharpened your discernment, every silent night where you questioned your worth, heaven was watching. Not to judge you, but to observe how you would respond when comfort disappeared. This was not a test you signed up for. This was a test assigned to you because of who you are. There were days you felt invisible, days you wondered if obedience was worth it, days you looked around and saw people cutting corners, compromising values, advancing faster than you while you were stuck doing the right thing with nothing to show for it. And still, you stayed aligned. Still, you refused to become someone you were never meant to be. That restraint was not weakness. That restraint was evidence. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many times did you almost walk away? Not just from people, but from faith itself. How many times did you whisper, "What's the point?" Yet something inside you wouldn't let go? That wasn't stubbornness. That was divine grip. When your strength ran out, purpose took over. You were being held in place while the test ran its course. The final test never announces itself. It disguises itself as delay, as unfairness, as unanswered prayers. It shows up when you've already given everything and are asked to give a little more. That's where many fall away, not because they are weak, but because they don't understand what moment they're standing in. But you endured without explanation. You waited without guarantees. You obeyed without applause. And heaven marked that. God was not measuring your success. He was measuring your faithfulness under pressure. He was watching how you treated people who wronged you, how you spoke when no one corrected you, how you chose integrity when compromise would have brought relief. These were not small moments. These were defining moments, and you passed them quietly. There were crossroads you didn't recognize at the time, moments where one emotional decision could have derailed years of destiny. But something restrained you. Something whispered, "Don't do it, no matter the price." That wasn't fear. That was wisdom rising up from your calling. You were protected from choices you didn't even realize could destroy you. Hear this clearly now. The resistance increased because the test was almost over. Pressure always intensifies before promotion. Confusion peaks before clarity. Fatigue deepens right before breakthrough. The enemy sensed what heaven already knew, that you were about to cross a line that cannot be uncrossed. And still, you remained standing. The Spirit speaks clearly through the letter of James, chapter 1, verse 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. And this is not poetic encouragement. This is a spiritual law. Perseverance unlocks crowns. Endurance releases authority. You passed because you didn't harden your heart. You passed because you didn't let disappointment turn into rebellion. You passed because you stayed teachable when you could have grown cynical. Heaven saw that. And now, something has shifted behind the scenes. What drained you will soon empower you. What tested you will soon testify for you. You passed because you chose humility when pride would have felt justified. You allowed correction instead of resistance. You listened when it hurt, adjusted when it was uncomfortable, and kept your spirit soft in environments that tried to harden you. That softness is not weakness, it is spiritual authority in its purest form. You passed because you didn't allow pain to rewrite your identity. You refused to become what hurt you. Even when trust was broken and motives were questioned, you guarded your heart from becoming cold. That decision preserved your clarity. And clarity is what heaven entrusts with influence and responsibility. You passed because you learned how to wait without decaying inside. You endured delay without poisoning your faith. While others grew bitter in the waiting, you grew deeper. That inner growth is why what's coming won't crush you. You are not just receiving blessing, you are prepared to carry it. Before we move forward, anchor this moment. If this message resonates with your spirit, like it, share it with someone who is quietly enduring their own test, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And as a prophetic acknowledgement that you recognize this season is changing, comment the number 77 below. Let it be a sign that you understand the test is over and something new has begun. There was a season when heaven went quiet and you didn't understand why. You prayed the same prayers, you showed up with the same sincerity, yet the response you expected never came. Silence settled in, thick and uncomfortable. You wondered if you had missed something, if you had failed without realizing it, if God had turned his face away. But what you mistook for absence was actually observation. What felt like distance was focus. Heaven was not ignoring you. Heaven was studying you. Silence is one of the most misunderstood tools God uses with the chosen. When instruction would interfere with formation, God withholds it. When answers would short-circuit maturity, he delays them. This is where many lose clarity. They assume that silence means disapproval. In truth, silence often means trust. God does not hover over what he is confident in. He watches during that quiet stretch. Something profound was happening inside you. Without constant reassurance, your faith was being purified. You were no longer obeying for affirmation. You were no longer believing for immediate reward. You are learning how to stand simply because truth is truth, even when it feels unrewarded. That kind of faith is rare. That kind of faith is dangerous to darkness. Think about how easy it would have been to change during that season, to adjust your valued thoughts, to numb your discernment, to blend in. No one would have stopped you. No alarm would have sounded, and that's exactly why it mattered. Silence removes external pressure so internal reality can be revealed. Who are you when no one is watching? Who are you when obedience is inconvenient? Who are you when faith feels unanswered? God was watching how you treated people who could do nothing for you, how you handled disappointment without becoming cruel, how you spoke when frustration rose. Silence exposed your inner posture, and you remained anchored. You struggled, yes, but you did not collapse into resentment. You asked questions, but you did not abandon reverence. That balance is not learned in loud seasons. It is formed in quiet ones. There were moments when you thought you were drifting, but you were actually being steadied. Without constant instruction, you learned discernment. Without constant correction, you learned self-governance. Without constant reassurance, you learned how to listen internally. No, these are not beginner skill. These are leadership traits in the kingdom. Heaven's silence also protected you. Had God spoken too early, you would have moved before you were ready. Had he explained everything, you might have relied on information instead of transformation. So he allowed the quiet to do its work. Still waters don't mean stagnation, they mean depth. You see, noise creates reaction. Silence creates revelation. In the absence of external direction, your true motivation surfaced. You discovered why you really follow God. Not for miracles, not for recognition, but because something in you is aligned with truth itself. That realization didn't arrive as a feeling. It arrived as stability. Many people walk away during divine silence because they confuse discomfort with abandonment. But you stayed. Even when prayer felt one-sided, even when worship felt heavy, even when hope had to be chosen deliberately. Staying did something to your spiritual structure. It reinforced your roots, and rooted people don't topple easily. There is a reason the silence lasted as long as it did. God was allowing time to strip away dependencies that would have failed you later. Emotional crutches, external validation, spiritual shortcuts. You were being trained to carry weight without leaning, to stand firm without props, to believe without applause. According to what is revealed in the book of Proverbs, the chapter 20, verse 24, a person's steps are directed by the Lord. How then can anyone understand their own way? This truth reframes the silence. If God directs the steps, then confusion is not proof of misdirection. It is proof that guidance is happening beyond your awareness. You didn't need to understand every step. You only needed to keep walking, and you did. Even when clarity lagged behind obedience, even when meaning came later. That is the mark of trust that has matured past emotion. Silence also sharpened your hearing. When the noise faded, subtle conviction became clearer. You began to recognize the difference between impulse and instruction, between fear and warning, between desire and calling. That discernment will protect you in seasons where decisions carry consequences. What you didn't realize is that heaven was preparing you for visibility. Silence teaches restraint. It teaches timing. It teaches patience. People who cannot endure silence cannot be trusted with influence. They speak too quickly. They move too soon. They expose what should be protected. You learned how to wait. This is why the next season will feel different. You won't panic at uncertainty. You won't rush for answers. You won't collapse under pressure. You've been trained in quiet strength, and quiet strength is unshakable. God's silence was not a void. It was a workshop, and you were being shaped for what comes after the test, where clarity returns. Doors open and responsibility increases. You didn't lose your way. You were being guided without explanation. And that is one of the highest forms of trust heaven gives. There was a moment, quiet, sharp, unforgettable, when you almost quit. Not loudly, not dramatically. It wasn't a breakdown anyone witnessed. It was an internal fracture, a private crossroads where no one would have blamed you for walking away. You didn't announce it. You didn't post about it. You simply stood there, exhausted, wondering how much longer you could keep choosing the harder path with no visible reward. That moment mattered more than you know. This is where destinies are decided, not in public victories, but in private battles. The moment when quitting feels reasonable, when giving up feels justified, when compromise feels intelligent. That was not weakness knocking at your door. That was the final test revealing itself without a name. And it didn't ask you to be strong. It asked you to be honest. You told yourself you were tired, and you told yourself you had given enough, and you told yourself that no one would understand if you left, and that was true. But beneath all of that was a quieter question, one that cut deeper than emotion. Who will you be if you walk away? Not what will you feel, but who will you become? You stood at that edge longer than you admit. You weighed the cost of staying against the relief of leaving. You imagined a lighter version of your life without the burden of obedience, without the discipline, without the restraint. For a moment, it looked peaceful, but something stopped you. Not fear, not guilt, identity. You realized that walking away wouldn't just end the struggle, it would end a version of you that you had fought too hard to become. That hesitation was holy. You didn't stay because it was easy. You stayed because something inside you knew that relief purchased through disobedience always charges interest later. You understood, even without words, that some exits are permanent. Some doors, once closed from your side, do not reopen the same way. That awareness didn't paralyze you. It anchored you. The breaking point is where most people misunderstand the chosen. They assume endurance means you didn't feel it. They assume faith means certainty. They assume obedience means confidence. But the truth is harsher and more beautiful. You stayed while unsure. You obeyed while disappointed. You believed while emotionally empty. That is not normal faith. That is consecrated faith. There was no voice from the sky in that moment. No reassurance, no sudden peace. Just a decision made in weakness that produced strength later. Heaven doesn't always intervene to stop the struggle. Sometimes it watches to see what you choose when nothing stops you from leaving. This is why that moment almost broke you. It carried weight. It carried consequence. If you had walked away, no one would have chased you. That's the terrifying part. Tests of maturity don't come with guards. They come with freedom. And freedom reveals loyalty better than force ever could. You didn't pass because you were fearless. You passed because you were faithful while afraid. You didn't pass because you saw the outcome. You passed because you trusted the author. And in that instant, though you felt nothing shift, something irreversible happened in the spirit. As Jesus himself declared in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 13, "But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved." This is not about dramatic endurance. This is about quiet resolve. Standing firm when no one is watching. When standing feels pointless. When the end isn't visible. Standing firm doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like simply not moving, not retaliating, not resigning, not becoming bitter, just staying where God placed you. Even when it feels like everyone else is advancing faster by cutting corners you refuse to cut. That moment when you almost quit stripped away illusions. It clarified your allegiance. It revealed that your faith wasn't transactional. You weren't following God because things were working, you were following Him because truth had taken root in you. That kind of grounding cannot be shaken by circumstances, when it can only be revealed by them. You may not realize it yet, but that decision changed how heaven relates to you. Trust deepened. Responsibility increased. Some instructions are only given to those who have proven they won't abandon the process halfway through. You crossed that line quietly. And now, when resistance rises again, it won't confuse you the same way. You've been here before. You know what it feels like to almost give up and not do it. That memory will steady you in future storms. You won't panic as easily. You won't question your calling every time pressure increases. You've already answered the hardest question once. Before we move on, seal this moment with intention. If you recognize yourself in this turning point, leave a short declaration in the comments. I remain faithful. Those 3 words are not for performance. They are for alignment. They acknowledge that you stayed when leaving was easier, and that you understand faith is not proven by emotion, but by consistency when emotion disappears. Passing the test did not end the story. It changed the rules. That is the part few people understand. You didn't simply survive something difficult. Something inside you shifted the moment you endured instead of retreating. It wasn't emotional, it wasn't dramatic, and it was structural, like a foundation being reinforced underground while everything above still looked the same. You woke up the next day expecting life to feel different, but it didn't. And yet, nothing was the same anymore. What changed first was not your circumstances, but your position. Before the test, you were being shaped. After the test, you were being trusted. There is a difference between being protected and being entrusted. Protection keeps things away from you. Entrustment places weight on you. Responsibility increases quietly before blessing becomes visible. That's why the aftermath felt strange, lighter in some ways, heavier in others. You may have noticed that things that once tempted you no longer have the same pull. Old distractions lost their flavor. Certain conversations feel shallow now. Some environments feel loud, even draining, and that's not pride, that's recalibration. Passing the test adjusted your internal compass. You can't unlearn discernment once it's activated. You can't unknow what pressure taught you. What also changed is how resistance operates around you. Before, opposition tried to break you. Now, it tries to delay you. Before, the attack was obvious. Now, it's subtle. Distractions instead of disasters. Comfort instead of chaos. The goal is no longer destruction, it's stagnation. Because what has been proven cannot be easily defeated. You didn't just gain endurance, you gained authority. Authority doesn't announce itself, it's recognized by the atmosphere. That's why people may respond to you differently now without knowing why. Some feel drawn, some feel irritated, some feel exposed. Authority reveals alignment or the lack of it. And not everyone is comfortable around someone who has been refined by fire. Passing changed your spiritual eyesight. You're more aware of timing now, less impulsive, less reactive. You pause before speaking. You sense when to move and when to wait. This wasn't learned from books. It was forged under pressure. And because it was earned, it can be trusted. There is also grief in this stage, though few talk about it. You grieve who you were before the test. You grieve the innocence, the simplicity, the version of you that didn't yet know how costly purpose can be. But you don't want to go back. Growth always costs familiarity, and maturity always closes certain doors permanently. You may feel alone at times, not because you lack people, but because your frequency has changed. You can still love deeply, but you can't pretend anymore. You can still serve, but you can't shrink. You can still listen, but you can't ignore discernment. Passing the test clarified your boundaries, and boundaries confuse those who benefited from your lack of them. What changed most profoundly is how heaven responds to you, not with favoritism, but with expectation. There are prayers God answered immediately before that He now delays not to withhold, but to invite partnership. You're no longer being carried the same way. You're being asked to walk with Him. That shift can feel unsettling if you don't recognize it. According to the ancient words recorded in the book of Luke, chapter 16, verse 10, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. Passing the test proves something about your stewardship, not just of resources, but of truth, restraint, and obedience when it was costly. This is why what comes next will require more from you than before. Not more effort, but more precision, less striving, more alignment, less explaining, more listening. You won't need to announce your growth. It will speak for itself through your decisions, your peace, your consistency. You may be tempted to rush now, to make up for lost time. Resist that urge. Passing the test did not put you behind, it positioned you correctly. Speed without clarity leads to burnout. Movement without instruction leads to regret. You didn't endure all of that just to act prematurely now. Let this settle in you. You are not waiting anymore. You are preparing. There is a difference. Waiting feels passive. Preparation feels intentional. Even when nothing visible is happening, something is aligning. And alignment is always invisible before it becomes undeniable. As you step into this next phase, remember you don't walk it alone. Messages like this don't find people randomly. They find people at transition points. If this word has helped bring clarity to what you've been sensing but couldn't name, take a quiet moment to acknowledge it. You don't need to make noise about it. Just stay connected to what feeds your discernment. And if you feel led, support this space gently by liking, sharing it with someone who is also navigating a silent transition, or subscribing so you remain aligned with what's unfolding ahead, not out of obligation, but out of recognition. Growth is sustained by what we choose to stay connected to. You passed the test. Now you're learning how to live as someone who did. Passing the test didn't just change you internally, it sent a signal outward. The moment you crossed that invisible line, the spiritual environment around your life adjusted. You may have sensed it as subtle resistance, unexpected tension, or a strange heaviness that appeared without warning. This is where many become confused. They assume that passing the test should bring immediate ease. But often, it brings exposure. Promotion always reveals position. You are now standing in a place where your presence carries weight. And weight attracts attention, both aligned and opposed. Before, the resistance was meant to stop you from becoming. Now, it is meant to slow you down from advancing. That shift matters. You are no longer fighting to survive. You are learning how to move forward without becoming distracted. Opposition after promotion is different. It doesn't roar, it whispers. It doesn't threaten openly. It suggests alternatives. It offers comfort. It introduces delays that look reasonable. The danger now is not collapse, it's compromise disguised as wisdom. And this is why discernment, not strength, becomes your greatest weapon in this season. You may notice people testing your boundaries in new ways. Some will question your decisions. Some will minimize your growth. Some will suddenly reappear from old seasons, offering familiarity that feels comforting but carries old limitations. This is not coincidence. Old doors knock loudest when new doors are about to open fully. What once couldn't reach you will now try to negotiate with you. Understand this clearly. Resistance is not proof that you missed God. It is confirmation that you are positioned correctly. The enemy does not contend for what he already owns. He contests what he cannot control. And control is lost when authority is established. There is also a temptation in this stage to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to prove that you deserve what you're stepping into. Resist that urge. Authority does not defend itself. It demonstrates itself through consistency. The more you explain, the more you leak power. Silence now is not weakness, it is maturity. You will feel pressure to move faster than instructed. Pressure to respond instead of remain steady. Pressure to say yes to opportunities that look good but aren't aligned. Remember this, not every open door is an assignment. Some are distractions dressed as blessings. Passing the test didn't mean every option is now safe. It means your decisions now carry greater consequence. This is where patience returns, not the desperate patience of waiting, but the disciplined patience of discernment. You are learning to ask different questions now. Not is this good, but is this mine? Not can I do this, but was I sent to do this? These questions protect what you've been entrusted with. There will be moments when resistance feels personal, when criticism feels unfair, when misunderstanding cuts deeper than before. That's because your impact reaches further now. Light always creates sharper contrast. You are not responsible for how others respond to your growth. You are responsible for remaining aligned while you grow. You are also being watched more closely than you realize, by people who want to learn, by people who want to imitate, and yes, by people who hope you stumble. This is not meant to make you fearful. It is meant to make you intentional. Integrity matters more now than ever before. Small compromises echo loudly at higher levels. The Spirit spoke through the prophet Jeremiah. Chapter 1, verse 10. See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. Authority always comes with dual responsibilities, not just to build, but to discern what must be removed. Not just to plant, but to uproot what threatens growth. You are learning how to say no without guilt, how to step back without fear, how to move forward without arrogance. These are not natural skills. They are learned under pressure, and pressure will continue not to harm you, but to refine your response. Do not be surprised if rest feels different now, if joy feels quieter, if peace feels deeper but less dramatic. This is stability replacing adrenaline. This is grounding replacing urgency. You are no longer fueled by crisis. You are sustained by clarity. The season ahead requires consistency, not intensity. Faithfulness, not frenzy. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You need to protect what has been proven. That means guarding your time, your focus, your emotional energy. Not everyone gets access to you now, not because you are better, but because you are responsible for more. There will be moments you miss the simplicity of before. That doesn't mean you should return. Growth always carries nostalgia, but calling always pulls forward. You didn't endure all of that just to retreat into comfort now. Before we move further, anchor yourself in this truth. If you feel the weight of this season and recognize that you are stepping into greater responsibility, mark it intentionally. Comment the number 88 below, not as a trend, not as performance, but as acknowledgement. 8 represents new beginnings, and doubled it signifies alignment with what is unfolding. Let it be your quiet declaration that you are aware resistance has changed. Because you have changed, and you are ready to walk forward with wisdom. After the Red Sea closed, Moses did not step into rest. That is one of the most misunderstood truths in Scripture. Deliverance did not lead him into ease, it led him into responsibility. The enemy behind them was gone, but a new challenge emerged almost immediately: resistance from within. The people who had cried out for freedom now questioned the cost of being free. And Moses, the same man God used to split the sea, found himself standing between promise and protest. This is where many assume the story should turn triumphant. Songs had just been sung, chains had just been broken, miracles were fresh. Surely now would come peace. But instead, murmuring rose, complaints followed, hunger replaced gratitude, fear resurfaced in new forms. The danger was no longer Pharaoh's army, it was the instability of the people Moses was leading. This shift matters deeply for you, because after promotion, opposition rarely comes from the past. It comes from the present, from people who walk with you but don't grow at the same pace, from voices that benefited from deliverance but resist discipline. Moses discovered that freedom exposes hearts. He had obeyed God fully. He had raised the staff. He had walked forward when the sea stood in the way. And yet, Just days later, the same people questioned his leadership. They asked why he brought them out to die. They longed for Egypt when the wilderness felt uncomfortable. Deliverance didn't immediately produce maturity. And Moses had to learn how to lead people who were free in body but still enslaved in thinking. This is where leadership becomes lonely. Moses could no longer rely on signs alone. Miracles may open doors, but character sustains direction. He was now responsible not just to confront enemies, but to shepherd frustration, not just to obey God, but to absorb blame. The calling shifted from dramatic obedience to patient endurance. When water was bitter at Marah, the people complained. When hunger struck, they accused. When thirst returned, they doubted. And Moses stood between God and the people, carrying intercession on one side and accusation on the other. This is the hidden cost of being chosen. You become a buffer. Notice something critical: Moses did not abandon the people, but neither did he follow their panic. He brought the complaints to God instead of reacting to them. That restraint protected the mission. Had he lashed out, division would have grown. Had he agreed with their fear, progress would have stalled. He learned to remain anchored while surrounded by instability. This mirrors your season more than you may realize. After breakthrough, you are not just tested by external resistance, you are tested by internal tension, misunderstanding, criticism, and pressure from those who expected the journey to be easier than it is. You begin to see who wants the promise and who wants the process. Moses also learned something else. God's presence does not remove responsibility. Even when manna fell from heaven, Moses had to organize the camp. Even when water flowed from the rock, structure was required. Miracles did not eliminate leadership, they increased the need for it. There were moments Moses felt overwhelmed. He questioned his capacity. He asked God why the burden felt so heavy. This honesty did not disqualify him, it refined him. God responded not by removing the people, but by expanding Moses' support and sharpening his discernment. Growth did not mean escape, it meant expansion. Heaven speaks clearly through the words recorded in the book of Exodus, chapter 16, verse 8. You will know that it was the Lord when He gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because He has heard your grumbling against Him. This verse reveals a sobering truth. God heard the complaints, but He did not cancel the calling. Provision continued, even while correction was necessary. Moses had to learn how to lead without being fueled by approval. Gratitude was inconsistent, loyalty was fragile, yet the assignment remained. This forced Moses into deeper dependence on God, not on people's response. That dependence anchored him through moments when affirmation was absent. There is a reason this story appears immediately after deliverance. Scripture is teaching us that freedom is not the end goal, formation is. God was shaping a nation, not just rescuing individuals. And Moses was being shaped alongside them. His leadership was forged not at the sea but in the desert. This is the stage you are entering, where your faith is no longer proven by breakthrough, but by steadiness. Where your authority is no longer confirmed by miracles, but by how you handle tension without losing alignment. You will be tested not by enemies chasing you, but by voices questioning you. Moses did not go back to Egypt. He did not abandon the calling. He adjusted. He listened, he learned, and over time he became not just a deliverer but a lawgiver, a builder, a guide. His role expanded as his endurance deepened. What sustained Moses was not constant reassurance, it was clarity of assignment. He knew who sent him, and that knowledge outweighed the noise. When people complained, he went to God. When pressure increased, he leaned into instruction. That posture kept him from reacting emotionally to spiritual tension. This is the wisdom you are being invited into now. To understand that resistance after deliverance is not failure, it is transition. It is proof that the journey has moved from escape to establishment, from survival to structure. Moses' story reminds us that the wilderness is not punishment. It is preparation. It reveals what Egypt hid. It exposes what miracles don't fix overnight. And it trains leaders to stand firm when gratitude fades. You are not strange for feeling this shift. You are walking a familiar biblical path, from the sea to the desert, from victory songs to difficult conversations, from deliverance to discipline. And just like Moses, you are not alone in it, even when it feels that way. You have reached a point where what was once locked is now responding to your presence. This is not because circumstances suddenly became favorable, but because you changed. Doors do not open merely by desire, they open by alignment. And alignment is what the test produced in you. You are no longer knocking as someone hoping to be noticed. You are approaching as someone recognized. What opens now will not look dramatic at first. In fact, it may look almost ordinary. A conversation, an invitation, a responsibility, a quiet opportunity that doesn't announce its importance. This is where discernment matters more than excitement. Destiny rarely shouts. It whispers because it assumes you're listening. The temptation at this stage is fear disguised as caution. You may feel the urge to hesitate not because you doubt God, but because you know the cost of obedience now. Before stepping forward felt hopeful. Now it feels weighty. That's because you understand consequences. You understand that obedience reshapes your life permanently. But hear this clearly: fear that rises at the threshold of purpose is not a warning to retreat. It is a signal that what you're stepping into matters. You are not walking into randomness. You are walking into rooms prepared during seasons you didn't understand. The discipline you learned will now protect you. The restraint you practiced will now guide you. The patience you cultivated will now sustain you. Nothing from the test was wasted. It was all training for access. Some of what opens will require you to let go of old identities. You can't carry the same self-perception into the next room. You can't keep introducing yourself as broken when you've been refined. You can't keep shrinking to make others comfortable when your assignment requires visibility. This is not arrogance. This is accuracy. You may also notice that fewer people can walk with you into what opens next. That's not punishment. It's reality. Certain callings narrow the path. Certain responsibilities require focus. Jesus himself walked with many but entrusted few. Depth always reduces crowd size. Do not confuse isolation with abandonment. Isolation in this season is often protection. God is limiting interference while you learn how to function at a new level. Too many voices would distort clarity. Too much access would dilute authority. This narrowing is intentional. As doors open, you will feel the pull to rush to finally enjoy what was delayed. Resist that. Acceleration without wisdom leads to regret. You waited this long not because God was slow, but because you needed to become someone who could handle what opens without losing yourself. Move deliberately, let peace lead, not pressure. You will also face moments of doubt that sound like humility. Thoughts like, who am I to step into this, or what if I fail? Now, these thoughts are not always sinful, but they must not become deciding factors. Calling is not about worthiness, it's about obedience. God does not call the qualified, He qualifies the called. The ancient words recorded in the book of Ephesians, chapter 3, verse 20, remind us now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. Notice where the power operates not around you, but within you. The test activated something internal. What opens now responds to that power. This is why you must guard your inner life more fiercely than ever. What you allow to influence your thoughts will shape how you steward what's coming. Discouragement now would be costly. Distraction now would be dangerous. This is not the time to drift spiritually, it's the time to stay anchored. You are stepping into a season where obedience produces momentum. Small, faithful steps will lead to larger impact. Quiet consistency will create visible fruit. You won't need to force outcomes. Alignment will do the work for you. As you move forward, remember this: you are not proving yourself anymore. You are representing something greater than yourself. That awareness should not intimidate you. It should stabilize you. You don't have to impress. You have to remain faithful. If this message has walked with you through this journey, if it has helped you recognize the season you're in, stay connected. Not out of obligation, but out of resonance. Like it if it strengthened you. Share it with someone who may be standing at their own threshold. And subscribe so you continue receiving what nourishes clarity rather than noise. Growth is sustained by what we choose to remain aligned with. You passed the final test, not because you were perfect, but because you were faithful. And now, what opens will require the very character the test produced. Before you leave this moment, don't rush to define it. Some messages are not meant to be concluded, they are meant to echo. Let what you've heard settle where it needs to settle. You don't have to decide everything now. You don't have to label what's next. Sometimes awareness itself is the shift. You may notice that something feels slightly different inside you. Quieter, clearer, or maybe unresolved, but awakened. That's okay. Not every turning point arrives with certainty. Some arrive as an invitation to pay attention, to walk more deliberately, to listen more closely to what's been forming beneath the surface of your life. If this message resonated, you don't owe anything in return. But if you feel led, if you sense that this helped name something you've been carrying, you're welcome to respond in your own way. You can like it. You can share it with someone who might need it. Or you can simply carry it forward quietly, letting it shape your next steps. What matters most is not what you do here, but how you move from here. Stay honest. Stay grounded. Stay open. Some doors open slowly and some answers only come while walking. We'll leave it there unfinished, on purpose.